Hi, this is Jack Wilcox making part 2 of my 10 cent 25 cent rush video for thepokerbank.com. Not sure exactly where I left off in the last video, but this is exactly halfway through the session, so I'm going to start the video from here and we'll play it through till the end. Obviously a standard raise with aces on the bottom right, and if it folds me on the button here I should be opening with 7-3 offsuit. I don't think people are free betting nearly enough to warrant folding it. I would have isolated with Queen 9 offsuit if he had folded to me. If I knew a bit more about this player I could put in a light free bet, because he's probably going to be isolating the limper quite wide if he's a regular, and he's seen full stacked, so I'm going to assume that most full stack players are regulars. Table 1, I think a lot of people sometimes check back this flop because they figure that he's never folding a better hand, and a lot of his worse hands have quite good equity. And obviously if you get check raised you have to fold, but I think that if I check back this flop I look pretty weak, and he's going to be stabbing a lot of turns. Quite a few people will just like automatically stab the turn if you check back the flop, and there's literally no turns that I can really continue on apart from a 6. Obviously a 5 and a 7 both give me a gut shot, but I don't particularly have great equity versus anything that he can really be betting, so it's better to just bet and try and take the pot down. If I get called there's potentially some turns that I can turn my hand into a bluff, but it's better to just bet there and take the pot down. If I had something like 10-9 or like 10-9 offsuit, then I'd be more inclined to check back because there's a lot more turns where I can continue. But with pocket sixes there, I just don't have any equity when he leads the turn, and I can't really continue unless I want to make a superhero cooldown. Again, opening 8-5 off, 8-5 suited on the 2 and 8-5 off, 8-3 off on table 1. Just going to be opening tons of buttons and cut-offs because people just aren't playing back enough at these kind of stakes. Even if you get a couple of blinds that are like free betting 8%, then that's still not very high really, and you can still try and you're still going to be able to steal enough to make it profitable. Here with King 8 offsuit on table 2, basically when he calls from the blinds, usually he's either going to have a couple of Broadway cards or a hand like pocket 4s, pocket 5s looking to set mine, or suited connectors, that type of thing. But basically, so when he checks, he's either check folding or he's check calling, and the hands that are going to check fold are just going to check fold the turn, because if he's got a hand like pocket 4s or like 7-8, then he hasn't really got any equity on this board. He's just going to check fold the turn. Also because when I check back this board, everyone expects people to see bet ace high board when they've got nothing. So when I check back this flop, I actually look like I've got a weak ace or like a queen or pocket king, something like that. And so I don't expect him to stab on this kind of flop texture. Whereas on the texture like 10-8-5 with a flush draw, he's never going to expect me to check back anything like with value. So if I check back on a sort of low drawy board, he's going to be able to stab the turn. Whereas if he checks. Whereas if I check back on ace queen 2, then he's probably going to give me credit for a bit of showdown value, not trying to take me off it. I'd bet the turn because once he checks twice, I figured that he's got a hand like pocket 6s, something like that, or maybe even like a sort of queen jack type hand, and if he doesn't fold the turn I can potentially get him to fold some rivers. When he check calls again and leads this river, I think mostly he's just value betting. I don't particularly like bluff raising. Definitely I can't call because I can't really put him on a float after he check calls the turn. You'd expect him to just, if he had like a flush draw, you'd expect him to just lead the turn. So when he check calls, he pretty much always has something. And here you can see I'm thinking about bluff raising, but I think once I check back the flop, I'm not particularly repping much by raising this river. And he's probably got a hand weak ace or queen or something, and he's probably just decided that he's going to call a river raise if I make it. Make a bit of a bigger c bet on this king queen 9 rainbow board, because if he's got a hand like pocket 4s, he's going to just fold whatever I bet, and if he's got a hand like king jack or queen 10, then he's going to call a 150 bet the same amount of times as he's going to call like a $1 bet. So this kind of board where might as well just bet bigger, because his calling range isn't going to change whatever I bet. He's either calling or he isn't. He's decided before he's checked whether he's going to call a bet or whether he's going to fold. Ace 3 off, I think I can open with the players behind me. They don't particularly look very aggressive. You know, I'm trying to steal as much as possible because it's just basically free money. If I can make 35 cents a hand from just stealing the blinds, then might as well do it. That's going to add quite a lot to your win rate. And when people do call anyway, they're playing quite straightforward on a lot of flops, and not really putting me in too many difficult spots. I'll go back and check back the 5-5-4. I expect him to check call not only with his overpairs but also with a lot of like ace high, king high type hands. And he leads the turn, and I call. He can be stabbing the turn really wide once I check back the flop, and basically I think that he's going to play his range quite face up on the river. Obviously I can also hit ace and usually be good. I can also hit a 2 and pretty much always be good. So I've got some outs on the river, and I can sometimes be behind as well. I'm contemplating putting another bluff raise in here, but again I don't really rep anything except for pocket nines if I raise the river, or jack nines, something like that. On table 2 again, like it's a board where if he check folds this flop, it's because he's got a hand like pocket sevens and he's just going to check fold the turn anyway, so I don't need to see bet. When he leaves the turn there, I'm just going to give him credit for some sort of value hand and not call. The other option on those type of boards, like the king, queen, 9, rather than checking back and trying to take it on later streets, is you can see bet and then plan to fire multiple barrels to get them off hands like queen, jack or king 10, those type of hands, because obviously pretty much never going to have kings or queens because they would have free bet them pre-flop. Same goes for ace king and king queen sometimes. Pretty much never going to have jack 10 or like a set when they check call the flop, because you expect them to check raise, and so when they check call, you usually got like a pair plus a draw, and obviously if you free barrel at these stakes, like a lot of people are going to give you, well, regulars at least, are going to give you quite a bit of credit. So it's a good flop where you can see bet and then fire multiple barrels, or you can just check back and try and take the pot on a later street. It's one of those choices, but see betting and then giving up is kind of bad, because if you're see betting and giving up, then you're kind of giving him credit for like a king jack type hand, and he's not, and thinking that he's not going to fold it, when really he can't really call down for free streets with top pair weak kicker on like a king queen 9 board, just because you can rep so many hands. Here we got like a sort of someone who I've identified as a weaker player just because he's a short stack, and he doesn't, although it's only 5 hands, he doesn't seem to have shown any aggression, basically just because he's a short stack and like one table in. So I'll go ahead and call with king 2 offsuit. I've got position, getting 2-1 pre-flop, so getting good pot odds, and king high rates to be ahead of quite a lot of hands, all the suit connectors and stuff. It's also going to be a lot of pots where I could take it from him. Expect people like this to play their range quite face up. When he pots the ace jack 2 board, obviously I can't really do anything, but there's going to be a lot of flops where he's either going to give up, or I'm going to flop a king and have really good XP versus him, or I can just float and take the pot away later, those kind of things, If I get free bet by the big blind here, he's regular, someone I've identified as a regular, and I would have just 4-bet and got pocket jacks in. It's not really a hand that plays great when you flat out of position to a free bet, because on any ace king or queen flop, you got to check call once and then kind of guess on the turn. It just plays a lot better to 4-bet and get it all in pre-flop. He's going to be shipping it in with hands like pocket 10s and ace king and sometimes ace queen, so it's not like you get it in bad all the time. And he's going to be free betting a lot there blind v blind if he's a good aggressive regular. I decided to check back on the ace 5-2 flop. Basically, when two people call my my isolation raise, especially someone who's limped in, he's just going to have ace x a lot, and so you expect to get called like once, and then trying to barrel fish off top pair is just kind of setting money on fire really, because they don't like folding. Queen 2 offsuit, just a little bit loose to open in the cutoff there, even though I'm opening a lot from late position. I think I've got two options here. I can either limp in or raise with the king 7. My cursor's going to the fold, but I don't like that. I think I should definitely either be raising or calling. The reason why I would potentially call instead of raise with a player like this is that he's got quite a short stack and he's going to get committed quite easily on a lot of flops. So if he's getting committed on quite a lot of flops, then I'm not going to have as much fold equity. So bad time to make the pot big, because I'm not going to be able to bluff much. Here on the king 6-3, I'd like a c-bet. Checking back's also fine, but with a player that seems to be what short stack fish, it's definitely going to be check calling a flop with any pair. and maybe even some ace high hands and some draws. When he checks the turn, figured out he's never got 6 or king, so good time to put in a value bet. When he shoves, obviously that read kind of changes. I have to give him credit for at least something. Good turn to 2-barrel on the top left. Obviously unlikely that he's got an ace unless he called the flop with a hand like ace 10, or you know, or if he floated like ace jack or ace queen. It's also good because the ace is a free flush. If the ace was offsuit, then obviously he can have hit it a lot more because he can have all the ace x flush draws in his range. But when the ace is the free flush, he's obviously can't have the ace high flush anymore. So his flush draws are limited to, you know, like king queen of diamonds, 6 7 of diamonds. You know, not very many hands. And also some of those flush draws would have raised the flop because they've got a flush draw and a gut shot, or a flush draw and gut shot on overcards. So basically, on this turn, he's going to have like maybe something like pocket jacks, pocket queens if he slow played that pre-flop, a hand like jack 10, 9 8, that sort of thing. And if he was to call this turn, I'm probably going to through barrel because it's just really unlikely for him to have a big hand, as it is he goes ahead and folds. This is a flop I could lead out on table 2, but the problem is that it's probably going to be peeling with like a lot of ace x hands. And just, you know, some people will just call the flop with bare overcards in that spot. So I don't think it's a great time to try and bluff the pot. 2 options on table 1. Obviously I can call or free bet. Folding's pretty bad again, getting 2 to 1 in position, and I've got a good hand in terms of can flop a lot of equity, like if you flop like a gut shot and a flush draw, or you can just flop, you know, flopping a pair blind v blind is actually quite big just because you've got quite good equity against their range. Just because it's kind of, people are going to be opening so wide blind v blind that it's hard to make a pair. Could have raised this flop with the intention of, you know, it being a bluff raise, because although I don't rep a ton of hands, people at these stakes are generally quite straightforward, and he would have probably just laid down any queen and maybe even some weak kings to a flop raise. Also, you know, because I've got bottom pair, like I can make him fold out stuff, like if he's c-betting pocket 10s, he's just going to fold without really thinking much. It's interesting to note that, you know, just check fold at that turn, because I'm going to be floating that flop a lot with, you know, really any ace high hand, any queen, any sort of jack 10 or like 10-9 type hand. So interesting to note that he just check fold at the turn there, gave up quite easily on the pot. See that on table 2, obviously for value. I think I can get another street of value by betting this turn. When he check calls the flop, he's unlikely to have a set. His most likely hand is going to be something like 5-4, or even some ace x hands, you know, pocket 6s, pocket 7s. So I can definitely get another street of value there and then check back the river. I think that's better than checking back the turn and then trying to value bet the river. Because once I check back the turn, it looks like I've... Well, when I bet the turn, I can potentially be bluffing, but when I check back the turn and then bet the river, it looks more like a sort of thin value bet as opposed to a bluff. Eight-2 is a hand that I'd probably fold if the small blind had opened, if it had folded around to him, just because it's a really crappy hand. But generally I'm not really folding much blind v blind when it gets opened by the small blind. If I'd known a bit more about the under the gun and the button, I could have squeezed here with the queen 8 suited, but knowing nothing about them, I think the best play is just to fold, because some people are going to be super tight under the gun, and obviously free betting when they're super tight is not going to be very good play. But it's a spot where you just get a ton of credit if you free bet here, so it's a good spot to squeeze if under guns are opening kind of loose. 6-2 off, I should be opening on the button if it gets folded to me, just because the blinds look pretty tight. As you can see, people just folding so much. People just folding their blinds so much that you're just printing money by trying to steal. Could even make it a little bit smaller, like rather than making it 75, you could just make it like 60. And that gives you a better price, means it doesn't have to work quite as often. Although obviously the flip side of that is that people may be more likely to free bet you or to call and then, you know, make some moves on some flops. 10-6 suited, kind of marginal there from middle position. I could justify it open, but the problem is that even though a lot of these players are playing quite tight, there's I don't know any of them because there's such a big player pool for the 10 cent, 25 cent rush tables. So basically, like you can see, I've barely got any hands on anyone, even though I've been playing for like half an hour. I think most people would have called there with sixes. I think that's a fold though, because I'm just not getting a very good price. I'm only getting 10 to 1 on his stack, and there's a chance that someone's going to squeeze from behind me. It's generally, there's just not going to be many flops that I can continue on, because sixes are going to flop, you know, an underpair to the board sometimes, or they're going to flop, you know, have a flop with 2 overcards. Not many flops that I can continue on. So I'm basically playing for set value, and I think that the best play is just to fold because I'm not getting a very good price on his stack. Even if he was a full stack, could justify a fold in some situations, just because you're not really getting paid that much, like versus any kind of reasonable range. Although they're going to flop, you know, some overpairs and stuff, people are just c-betting with, you know, ace king and ace queen every time, and so combo wise they're going to have so many random ace high hands or random, you know, king high hands, that unless the flop comes, you know, ace 6 2, he hasn't really got many hands that he can put much money in with. Because like say the flop is like jack 8 6, yeah, I'm getting paid by his overpairs, but I'm not really getting money from like ace king or ace queen, because they might even just check fold the flop and not fire a c-bet if it's really coordinated. I'd like to see myself free bet on table 1, because when the guy min raises, I just feel that most of the time they're not going to have a hand. Unless I've seen them do it before with big hands, you know. When someone min raises like they did on table 2, I'm going to be defending any hand. Even if I had 8-3 offsuit, I would have defended for a min raise. He calls, and obviously you get a pretty sweet flop. When he calls my free bet, a lot of his range is going to be some ace queen, ace jack, king queen. That's the sort of limit of most of his high hard hands probably, and then sort of pairs like 9s, 10s, jacks that he didn't want to free bet and get in pre. I think that c-betting here is the best option. I could check back and try to rep like ace king that's just given up, so that he'll fire the turn, but I'm not sure how aggressive he is. I'm not sure if he's going to do that. Okay, good turn for me. Expect him to check raise all his sets on the flop, so there's no. I don't think there's any chance that I'm beat now. If I was ahead, well, I think that once he check calls the flop, I'm definitely ahead because he check raises sets. So then, therefore, I'm always ahead now. So I'm trying to size my bet that so I can comfortably shove the river. I'm not sure what hands he can find folded on the turn. If he peeled the flop with like an overpair, then I can't really see him folding it now. Could have maybe sized this bet on the turn a little bit smaller. Actually, I would have liked to see myself make it about 550, because that will still make a $20 pot on the river, and he'll have like 15 left. But when I make it 675, it looks a lot more like I'm threatening his stack, you know. So I don't like my sizing there with that hand. I should have made it a bit smaller on the turn. There you can see I'm just marking someone blue. Basically that means that they've done something fishy, like limp in or something. At rush, you know, because the player pool's so big and you're not staying on the same table, you need to take any sort of note that you can. Just marking someone as regular or marking someone as a fish, it's going to help you when it comes to, you know, the next time you play them, because you're only going to have a couple of hands on them, and so you're not really going to have any stats that stand out usually. So if you know that someone's limped in, then you can probably identify them as a weaker player. And you know, and if you know that someone's 4 tabling, then you can probably identify them as a reg, and that's going to help you a lot with making decisions. Certainly a lot more than having no information at all. If I had been led into by the pre-flop raiser on the 10-9-3 rainbow, I think I would have just flat. The reason being that I'm not really scared of any turn cards. Like, I don't really have to protect my equity that much. Even if he's got a hand like Queen Jack, you know, he's not got that much equity really. And if I raise on the flop there's not much he can continue with apart from straight draws and overpairs, because you know, there's no flush draws he can have. The number of straight draws he can have is kind of limited, and obviously the number of overpairs doesn't make that many combos really. Don't need to see bet that big on table 2. If someone's got an ace, they're never folding, and I can just bet huge on the turn and river. And if someone's got a hand like pocket 8s or pocket 9s, I want them to call, so I can make my c bet a little bit smaller. Obviously the fact that there's 2 aces on the board makes it less likely someone else has got ace. I actually get a bit tricky on the turn here, but I don't think that I can get free streets or value on this board, because if I triple barrel this board, it just looks a ton like I have an ace. So I never expect anyone to call down with like pocket 10s. But if I check back the turn, then he can potentially value bet quite thinly on the river, or turn a hand into a bluff or something. When I check back the turn, I just look like I'm giving up basically. Also means that if he checks the river, I can bet and rep a weaker range than if I triple barreled. And since I've never getting free streets anyway, I don't need to worry about I don't need to worry about costing myself money, because he can never call with free streets with worse hand anyway. So yeah, pocket jacks, but I mean, if I 2-barreled a turn there, he's definitely folding, and even if he peeled the turn, then he's definitely folding the river. So I don't think I cost myself any money by checking back the turn there. And his river call is not terrible, because obviously once he checks 3 times, it doesn't look like he has an ace. So I can be value betting, pocket 10s, pocket 9s. When he half pots this flop, I think that I can probably bluff raise or float. I don't particularly like folding when he just half pots ace 8-2, but seems that I did. I don't like that play. I think I should definitely be making a play at that flop, because it's really hard for him to continue if he hasn't got an ace. Because although he'd expect me to free bet with aces and ace king pre-flop, I can still have ace 8, ace 2, 8s and 2s. So it's not, I'm not repping super small amount of combos when I raise there. And just the fact that he half potted it makes me think that he's weak, because he made it $1 pre-flop, then he bet $1 on a flop. Just seems like, oh, the flop come ace 8-2, I have to c bet. I think I can go one of 2 ways on the hand on table 1. I can check back the flop. The problem is, again, like, I'm never going to check back this flop with a big hand, and so he can stab on the turn with quite a lot of hands. I can also get value by betting this flop. Like, I can get value from king 10, ace 10. That's that sort of range. I think that overall I probably prefer a bet than a check, because if I check and he leads the turn, there's no turns I can continue on. Whereas if I'd bet the flop, I could 2-barrel this turn, turn my hand into a bluff to try and get him off something like jack 10. If he checks this river, I'd like to see myself bluff at it, because even though there's no reason necessarily for him to think I've got a diamond, it's just quite hard for him to call the river without one. But when he leads himself, I don't particularly like bluff raising. I think that he's always got a diamond when he leaves the river, and even if he's only got the 10 of diamonds, say, still don't expect him to necessarily want to fold it, especially since the king and the queen of diamonds is out there. At a more aggressive table, you could justify folding ace 8 suited under the gun if you're getting free bet a lot, but I mean, at this table it doesn't seem like there's anyone aggressive, although don't have any hands on 2 of them. But most important people to look out for is the button and the cutoff, and the button doesn't look aggressive, and I don't know anything about the cutoff, so I'm going to assume he's just average 10 cent 25 cent player. I'm probably not going to be very aggressive. I've decided to give up on this flop, where the reason is that when he calls my pre-flop raise, I expect him to have a lot of hands like pocket pairs, ace queen, ace jack type hands. So I just don't expect him to fold on the flop. He might even float with hands like king queen, which I'm ahead of, but I'm not really ever going to be able to get showdown against king queen, because if I check the turn, he's just going to bluff. As it is, he had ace 10, and he was never folding a flop if I bet there, I don't think, especially with a backdoor diamond draw. I'd like to see myself open 6-5 off in the table 1. and I'd like to see myself either call or free bet with 10-5 off. Folding is okay, I guess 10-5 is definitely one of the trashier hands. Queen Jack off, I fold under the gun. Basically doesn't play that well when you get called. Like, no one's really calling with worse kings and queens very often, and so if you go 2 or 3 streets on a queen or jack high board, then you're not gonna get called by worse. Decide to slow play versus short stack pocket kings. Usually I free bet, but because he's short stack, he's going to get himself committed on a lot of flops and turns anyway. So I don't feel there's that much reason to free bet, because the hands that are like, the hands that get in against pre-flop, like queens, jacks, tens, he's going to get committed on a lot of low flops with them anyway. When he checks the flop and turn twice, don't think he's ever got an ace. So I decided to make a value bet on the turn, because if he's got a hand like pocket sevens with a club, don't really want to give him a free shot at an 11 outer, I wouldn't mind seeing myself call here with pocket sevens. The reason being that when this guy free bets from the blinds, someone who don't know anything about him, but he's got exactly a $25 stack, so I assume that he's going to be a regular. I don't think many people are free betting there with like pocket nines, pocket tens, and some people wouldn't even be free betting with pocket jacks. But pretty much anyone's going to be free betting with ace king. So the less combos of like big pairs someone has actually works well for you, because it means relatively they've got a lot more combos of ace king, and so on a low flop, you're ahead of their range basically. And you can play very well, because a lot of people c bet those low flops and then they'll just check fold if they got ace king, and they'll just keep firing if they got an overpair. So I'd like to see myself call here, because getting 2 to 1, I feel that I'm going to be able to show a profit, especially when combined with the fact that I can, I'm still getting 10 to 1 on his stack. So I mean, I can flop a set and stack him, and I can also win on some boards where I don't flop a set because he's going to have ace king. If he bet this flop, obviously I was going to fold. When he checks, I could either try and make a play at the pot and then plan to 2 or 3 barrel, because I think when he checks, he's mostly going to have a hand like queens or jacks. I don't feel like this is the board that he'd slow play on. The problem is that, knowing nothing about him, he could be doing something weird, like looking for a check raise, with a monster like kings, tens, or ace king. And after I check back the flop, I don't think I can bluff the turn, because he'd expect me to bet any of my big hands on the flop. So although by the time he checks the flop and turn it looks like he's really weak, it also looks like I'm weak as well, and I wouldn't expect him to fold any pair. Get free bet on table 2, and I call, and then he c bets ace king 5, and obviously I have to call with top pair. Be planning to fold if there was any further action, because I just don't think people are going to fire multiple barrels on these kind of boards in free bet pots. I feel they just play really straightforward. Turn comes, and there's no real point in me betting, because I chop with any ace, and anything else I've got really good equity against. On the river, this is kind of a bit sick when he bets the river. Feel like I should probably call, but folding's certainly fine. Getting good pot odds is getting good pot odds. I can justify a call here, but I don't expect to be good very often, just because ace queen beats me, any king beats me, and I'd expect him to check the turn a decent amount with a king. I would also expect him to check the turn with ace queen, because he's chopping with any other ace on the turn. So he's either chopping with an ace or losing versus a flush. So it makes a lot of sense for him to check the turn with ace queen. And then when he bets this size on the river, it just looks like he's trying to get a call. So yeah, he can have ace queen, yeah, he can have a king. The only problem is that if he's doing this with like ace 10 or ace 9, something like that, then I'm losing quite a lot of money by folding, because I don't need to be good very often to call. Problem is, I'm not sure obviously if he's going to be free betting all the ace 10 and ace 9 hands. whereas he's a lot more likely to be free betting, you know, king queen and ace queen. Table table one. Think I should fire multiple barrels here. This is a good turn for me to continue to rep a queen, because obviously if I was bluffing the flop with a queen, just hit, and generally it just makes my range stronger and his range a bit weaker. Check raises, which is kind of weird, but with no equity at all, I don't think I can float. Just because, you know, there's literally no river that can improve me, so I have to rely on him check folding the river in order to justify calling the turn. And knowing nothing about him, I'm not sure that he's going to be doing that enough of the time to show a profit, even though he's repping really narrow range when he check raises the turn there. Again, min raise from under the gun, very unlikely to be a strong hand, so I go ahead and free bet. It's a hand that when I do get called, I've got a bit of equity because, you know, I can flop flush draws, I can flop, you know, really deceptive hands. And also the flops that hit me are likely to get action, because if I flop two pair or three of a kind or something, most of the time when he calls out position, he's going to have, you know, some sort of medium pair. Can also have the ace queen and king queen type hands, but he's going to have a lot of you know, medium pairs that will pay off one or two streets. If it folds round to me in the big blind, I think this is a fold of king queen on table 2, just because I'm not really dominating anyone's opening range and I don't have very good equity. If it's king queen suited, I'd call because I can flop more, you know, I can flop more of the time. I can flop flush draw, and usually I'll flop flush draw with overcards or something with a lot of equity. But king queen offsuit, I'm just not going to hit many flops very hard. I'm going to have to check fold a lot. And if I get and if he fires multiple barrels on an ace or on a king or a queen high flop, it's going to be pretty difficult to play. I like to see myself c-bet this flop on table 1. Again, it's a board where if I check back, then there's just no turns that I can call a bet on, so I don't really have that much showdown value, and therefore when you haven't got showdown value, you should be more inclined to bluff. Although again, I don't expect him to fold any better hands, don't really expect him to call with any worse hands. It's just a plus EV bet. That's the, you know, basic gist of it. If under the gun had opened on table 1, I would have called with ace queen offsuit, just because I dominate a bit more of his range. I dominate, you know, king queen, queen jack, ace 10. It's just a little bit stronger than, you know, king queen offsuit in that spot. I'll be firing a continuation bet if he checks this queen 9-2 flop. Lots of hands that I can get value from, you know, any pair of a club, even some ace high if he calls pre-flop with, you know, like ace jack with the ace of clubs, ace 10 with the ace of clubs. If he check raises, it would be quite an easy fold. I think king queen isn't very near the top of my range, and if I'm beat, then I've got no equity at all because he's going to have a flush or a set. So that's come to the end of the footage. Hope you enjoyed this little two-part series. I think that got quite a lot of hands in, even though they weren't particularly long videos. You should definitely try experimenting with Rush, especially if you don't like having loads of tables on your screen, because like, I can't really play more than 4 tables normally of normal play, just because I start to have loads of tables on the screen and it just, you know, my eyes are everywhere. But when I'm 4-tabling Rush, I'm playing like 800 hands an hour. To do that on normal tables, I'd have to be playing like 11 or 12 tables, which I just physically can't do. But I can do it quite easily on Rush because you've only ever really got maximum 4 decisions at once. And you can sit out and just be out the next hand, and then when you're dealt in, you've got like a 1 in 6 chance of being the big blind. So you don't lose any money like from sitting out and stuff. like you do in a normal table. If you were to sit out before it was your big blind, then you'd be costing yourself money. That's not the case at rush. So you should definitely give it a go, just because it's going to help you get tons of hands in, and obviously the more hands you can play, the more experienced you'll become, and the better player you should become in turn. And also rush is just really convenient because you can sit out when you want, you can sit in when you want. You don't have to wait for your big blind before you sit. You just click play now. Yeah, rush is good, definitely, for getting a lot of volume in, and I'd recommend it. Hope you enjoyed this video. This has been Jack Wilcox making a video for thepokerbank.com.